The year is 1921. Gunshots echo through the night. Screams cut through the smoke. Flames roar higher than church steeples. The sky above Tulsa glows red, lit not by the sunrise, but by hate. In less than 24 hours, a city within a city was erased. A place where black doctors healed the sick, where black lawyers argued cases in fine suits, where hotels, theaters, restaurants, and banks thrived in defiance of segregation. The world called it Black Wall Street. But on this night, it became an inferno. Homes looted, businesses burned to ash, families running for their lives through the streets they had built with their own hands. By dawn, Greenwood, the pride of Tulsa's black community, was rubble. Hundreds were dead, thousands were homeless. Wealth built over decades vanished in smoke. In 1921, an entire city within a city, thriving, wealthy, black, was wiped off the map in less than 24 hours. But here's the haunting question. How could such a place exist in the first place, in an America that tried to keep black people poor, powerless, and invisible? And if it did exist, why did some want it destroyed? To answer that, we must go back to the impossible dream that once stood, a dream called Greenwood. It's the early 1900s in America, a land of contradictions. The Statue of Liberty promises freedom, but in the South, Jim Crow writes the rules. Signs on water fountains remind you where you belong. Schools are separate. Jobs are scarce. And if you're black, the message is clear. Success is not for you. But in Oklahoma, something different was stirring. Oil money was flowing. New towns rising from dusty plains. And with it came opportunity. Rare, fragile, but real. Black families fled the Deep South, chasing the rumor of something better. They carried little more than suitcases and hope. And in Tulsa, they built their own sanctuary, a place they would name Greenwood. At first, it was just a few homes and shops, but brick by brick, dollar by dollar, it grew. Barbershops buzzing with voices, restaurants filling with laughter, banks run by black men and women lending to their own people. Doctors treating patients in their own hospitals, teachers instructing children in schools their community had paid for. Soon, Greenwood became more than a district. It became a symbol. The press called it the Black Wall Street, one of the wealthiest black communities in America. Picture the streets. Cadillacs gliding past brick storefronts. Elegant hotels, grand theaters, jazz floating into the night. Children skipping down sidewalks lined with businesses their parents owned. Imagine being told you couldn't sit in a white diner, but knowing you didn't need to, because your neighborhood had better food, better service, better pride. But here's the twist. Success in a world built on inequality doesn't just inspire, it provokes. As Greenwood thrived, resentment festered across the railroad tracks in White Tulsa. Envy of the cars, jealousy of the businesses, hatred of the audacity that black families could live not just with dignity, but with wealth. Greenwood was proof that the American dream wasn't color-coded, and that truth was dangerous. Narrator, imagine being told you can't share a water fountain, but you own a Cadillac on a street lined with black millionaires. But here is the question. In a nation where success was reserved for some, how long before envy turned into rage? How long before hate, set on fire, came for Greenwood? You step onto the streets of Greenwood in 1921. The air is alive. Jazz pours from open windows, spilling into the night. Children laugh as they skip past brick storefronts. And everywhere you look, black excellence. There's a theater on the corner showing the latest silent films. Crowds line up, dressed sharp in hats and long coats. Next door, a club hums with music, trumpets and saxophones battling for attention. Inside, glasses clank, people dance. For a moment, the outside world, the segregation, the insults, the threats, doesn't exist. By day, Greenwood streets are just as electric. Doctors in pressed suits stride to their offices. Lawyers carry stacks of case files. Teachers walk arm in arm with students, heading into schools built and funded by the community. And behind it all stand visionaries. O.W. Gurley, who first purchased land and dared to imagine a haven for black success. J.B. Stratford, the hotel owner whose grand building, luxurious, towering, welcomed travelers in style. Together with hundreds of others, they created more than a neighborhood. They created a statement. In all, there were over 600 black-owned businesses, more than 20 restaurants, newspapers, law offices, grocery stores, beauty parlors, tailors, doctors' clinics. A world within a world. Some called it the Negro Wall Street. Later, it would be remembered as the Black Wall Street. It wasn't just survival, it was defiance. Narrator, Greenwood was more than survival. It was defiance. Proof that black excellence could not be chained. But as the cars grew shinier, as the businesses grew stronger, as Cadillacs rolled proudly down Greenwood Avenue, resentment across town boiled hotter. For Greenwood's success was not just wealth, it was a challenge, a reminder that the American dream wasn't meant to be exclusive, and some would rather see it burned than see it shared. The dream was fragile. All it needed was one spark. And in May of 1921, that spark came. It's Memorial Day, 1921. Tulsa is hot, buzzing, restless. And in a single elevator downtown, two teenagers cross paths. One is Dick Rowland, a 19-year-old black shoe shiner, poor, quiet, ambitious. The other, Sarah Page, a young white elevator operator. What happened inside that elevator, we may never know. Some say he tripped and grabbed her arm. Some say she screamed in surprise. But in 1921 America, facts didn't matter. Accusations did. By the next morning, newspapers screamed headlines. Words like assault and attack printed in bold black ink. Rumors spread faster than truth ever could. And with those rumors came fury. A white mob began to gather outside the Tulsa courthouse. Their demand was clear. Hand over Dick Rowland. Lynching tonight. Inside the jail, Rowland waited, terrified, silent, trapped. Outside, the mob swelled. Hundreds of men shouting, armed with pistols, rifles, shotguns, the air thick with hate. But Greenwood heard the news too, and they refused to let history repeat itself. Black veterans, men who had fought for America in World War I, marched to the courthouse. They carried rifles on their shoulders. They knew the risk. They knew the danger. But they also knew this: they would not let another black man be dragged and murdered in the street. The scene became a powder keg. White Tulsa on one side, demanding blood. Black veterans on the other, demanding justice.
Shouts turned to threats. Men's hands gripped rifles tighter. The courthouse glowed in the night, lit by lamps and rage. And then, silence. For a moment, just silence, like the world was holding its breath, until a gunshot cracked the air. No one agrees who fired it, but that single bullet shattered the night. Chaos erupted. Shots fired back and forth, bodies hit the ground, and in that instant, Greenwood's fate was sealed. Narrator: what began as a single accusation ignited a war on an entire community. Because after that gunshot, Tulsa would never be the same. The mob would not stop at the courthouse. They would march. They would burn. They would kill. And when the smoke cleared, Black Wall Street would be gone. And when the first gunshot rang out, all of Greenwood's tomorrow burned. It's the night of May 31, 1921. Greenwood sleeps, unaware that its final night of peace has begun. And then, chaos. Armed white mobs pour into the district, kicking in doors, smashing windows, screaming as they drag families from their homes. Shops are looted, cash registers ripped apart, jewelry snatched, furniture hurled into the streets. But theft wasn't enough. They wanted Greenwood erased. Torches lit, matches struck, wooden walls burst into flames. One home, then another. Soon the entire block is on fire. The night sky glows red. Thick smoke swallows the stars. The sound of gunfire never stops. Survivors would later say, they shot everything that moved. Men, women, children. No one was spared. And then something unthinkable. Airplanes. Small biplanes circling overhead. But they weren't just watching. They were dropping incendiaries, firebombs from the sky. The first aerial assault on an American city, not by foreign enemies, but friends, on their own citizens. Imagine the terror. Families hiding in basements, the ground shaking as explosives hit. Parents shielding children as flames licked through the floorboards. The roar of engines above blending with the screams below. By sunrise, Greenwood was unrecognizable. Theaters reduced to ash. Schools turned to rubble. The Grand Stratford Hotel, once a jewel of black success, gutted by fire. Narrator: by dawn, Greenwood was rubble. Hundreds dead, thousands left homeless. Wealth built over decades, erased in hours. Black Wall Street, gone. Not by accident, not by natural disaster, but by design. And yet, the burning was not the final crime. What followed was worse. Because after the fire came the silence. The fires have died, the gunshots have faded, and Greenwood lies in silence. But the horror isn't over. Survivors, men, women, children, are rounded up, escorted at gunpoint, forced into makeshift internment camps, prisoners in their own city. Their crime? Surviving. Those who return to what was once home find only ashes. Schools where children once recited lessons, gone. Churches that rang with hymns, reduced to rubble. Businesses that had taken decades to build, erased in a single night. And then comes the final betrayal. Families file insurance claims, hoping for a chance to rebuild. But everyone is denied. Riot damage not covered. Injustice written in fine print. Generations of wealth gone. Dreams handed down through families turned to smoke. A community robbed twice, once by fire, and again by silence. Because what came next was erasure. For decades, the massacre was left out of history books. Teachers didn't mention it. Politicians pretended it never happened. Even in Tulsa itself, the story was whispered, if it was spoken at all. Narrator: trauma buried, voices silenced, an entire generation robbed of both wealth and memory. And yet, out of the ashes, survivors began again. They rebuilt businesses on the same streets that had been burned. They opened new shops, new homes, new schools. They carried scars, but also defiance. Greenwood's spirit refused to vanish, even when America tried to erase it. But here is the question. If an entire city could be burned down and then erased from history, how could America forget? How could the world not know until almost a century later?
Modern streets, glass towers, highways cutting through neighborhoods. And if you didn't know better, you'd never guess what once stood here. But listen closer. Beneath the sound of traffic, you can almost hear it. Jazz drifting through the night. Children laughing on sidewalks. The heartbeat of a community that once pulsed with pride. Greenwood's ashes are still here, buried under parking lots, hidden beneath new construction. But the memory, once erased, is rising again. Today, survivors' voices echo in courtrooms and protests. Families demand reparations for wealth stolen a century ago. Plaques, memorials, and museums tell the story once locked in silence. And each year, on Greenwood Avenue, the world gathers to remember. Because the story of Black Wall Street is not just about what was lost. It is about what was stolen, and what still echoes today. Every headline about racial violence, every conversation about reparations, every protest chanting justice, they all carry Greenwood's shadow. Narrator: the story of Black Wall Street is not just about what was lost. It is about what was stolen and what still echoes today. But here is the truth. History only lives if we tell it. And now you know their story. So the question becomes, what will you do with it? Because silence is what allowed Greenwood to burn once. Silence is what buried it for nearly a century. We cannot be silent again. If this story moved you, share it, tell someone, pass it on, because remembering is resistance, and memory kept alive becomes justice. Never forgotten, never erased, never again.